These are players that we would move for 2026 picks. Now, we're going to give you the strategy behind each of these moves and kind of who's going to be in that range or who we expect to be in that range in the draft, and then give you our rationale behind each take, along with giving you this context. For each of these trades, what we tried to do is we used multiple different resources, completed Dynasty trades from our Discord. We looked up, using the trade finder on multiple different websites to try to find trades that are actually going down for 2026 picks and which players are being moved for 26 first. We picked our favorites. We're including them in this video, and we're going to give you some general strategy behind them all, starting with early first here. In the early first round of Dynasty rookie drafts this year, I expect this to be Jeremiah Love, of course, Jordan Tyson, probably the 101 and 102. I would say Carnell Tate is going to be up there, and Makai Lemon are your probably top 4 picks. So we're talking early first, like a top 4 pick in this year's 2026 Dynasty rookie class. I'm going to start with Quinshon Judkins as somebody that I would sell because, again, odds are from a strategy standpoint, if you're buying or if you're selling a player to somebody with an early first, the person with the early first probably has a sucky team. Probably. There are, of course, scenarios where you have good teams with early first because they actually traded for those early first and the sucky team doesn't have their own first. But if you're buying them from a sucky team, you're probably not going to be able to trade like a veteran. Even though somebody like a Saquon Barkley is still technically as valuable as an early 26 first, because 26 firsts aren't very valuable right now in Dynasty, you're probably not getting that done because no rebuilding team that has their first is going to trade for Saquon Barkley at this point in his career. So Quinshon's one where he's a young player who's flashed this year, who has a lot of insulation that I think rebuilding and reloading teams with early first will bite on. And I think worst case scenario with Quinshon Judkins, if you trade him for a top 4 first this year, the worst case you're looking at is like a Carnell Tate, maybe a Denzel Boston. And I think that gets a little bit riskier. But if you don't know where the first is, again, we're just going to assume it's somewhere in you're obviously not getting the 101. And most of the time, you know where the 101 is in your Dynasty rookie drafts. But if you're in somebody in the 2 to 4 range and you're trading Quinshon Judkins, I think there's a good chance you get a receiver there that's going to be just as valuable as Quinshon Judkins right away. And you're also just playing, you're playing the odds that receiver is going to have a better situation than Quinshon Judkins, which means he would have more insulation than Judkins. And from a, dynasty value upside standpoint, in my opinion, have more upside than Quinshon from a value standpoint. I think Quinshon's value, I like Quinshon Judkins a lot. Obviously, we screamed and screamed and screamed at you to buy Quinshon Judkins on 5 different videos in the offseason. And it's paid off because he's really jumped up in value. But when you're looking at where he's valued now, I mean, he has really jumped up in the rankings here. He's essentially like an early to mid 3rd round pick in startups right now, which is where those early firsts are going. Now, again, that's probably going to be more like the 202 through the 204 for Quinshon Judkins, but I do think you can get it done still, and I've seen some trades on the trade finder where people have actually traded Quinshon for a 26 first. And so if you can get that done, I tend to like the receivers you're going to get there this year, and I think they're going to have tons of upside. I think you're going to have lots of receivers actually, probably 2 or 3 get pretty respectable draft capital, first round draft capital, and I think those guys in the last couple of years have hit at the highest rate. And so I would be comfortable trading Quinshon for an early first.
Then we got Nico Collins, who is kind of in that kind of dead zone in terms of age for some of these insulated high-end wide receivers. And that's kind of why we want to play the market with him right now when it comes to like some of these future picks. Is with Nico right now, he's 26 years old going on 27. In a situation that's been really, really volatile this season with now C.J. Stroud in and out of the lineup. This offense not able to protect Stroud for him to have time to get the ball downfield to Nico Collins. And again, long term, like we expect Houston to invest in the offensive line more than they have really ever since Stroud has come into that offense. But with Nico specifically, the price range that he's around, not just with the early first, but I mean even some of these other players. These are the wide receivers: Ted McMillan, Lab McConkey, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison. Like every single one of these guys, when we get to the offseason next year, are probably going to be ranked over Nico Collins just because they have multiple years over him, because that's the nature of playing Dynasty fantasy football. And you generally, heading into the offseason, want to own assets that are appreciating instead of depreciating. It gives you a lot more flexibility to make moves and get value wins in the offseason. And again, with an early 26 first, with these types of players that we're looking at, Jordan Tyson, Jeremiah Love, Makai Lemon, and Carnell Tate, they're all going to be ranked around that same price range that Nico Collins is right now, with a lot more room to go up depending on what situation they fall into, what their draft capital actually ends up being. Again, I could give you any one of these names and say these guys are going to be early first. We're pretty confident in that, but I mean, you might have some risers as well who sneak into there too. And again, think about this season and what happened to a lot of those running backs and wide receivers and where they ended up going from like that 101 to even 106 range. They all ended up being like top 4 to 5 round picks. And that's right around where Nico's probably going to settle, is like the late third round to early fourth. So it's nothing against Nico. He still has very high production upside, but he's kind of on that kind of similar value trajectory as AJ Brown, and you've seen how that's ended up for a lot of people that invested in him this offseason.
Probably the highest valued guy of these 4 players is Tyler Warren. Mm-hmm. Tyler Warren has been creeping up like to the early third, almost late second in a lot of drafts, especially in tight and premium leagues. And that's around when we've done startup drafts with rookie picks. That's around where we've seen the 102 go. So I think you're looking at the 102, 103 here. And so I think worst case scenario, you're looking at, one of Jordan Tyson, Lemon or Tate. And again, like, this just goes back. It's just a philosophical thing.
Positional value.
You feel free to disagree with. It's just how, you can play Dynasty a million different ways, and there's not a correct or incorrect way. How we tend to play Dynasty is we tend to value those wide receivers up top over the tight ends up top. And with Warren, I don't think it's any exception. I think with Warren, if you can get one of those wide receivers this year, which I think you're safely getting in the 102 to 104 range with Warren, I'm just more comfortable taking the positional value of a wide receiver than I am a tight end. Again, obviously people want to play different ways, and people value tight ends differently than we do. And if you're that person, then you can hold Tyler Warren, and I think that's perfectly acceptable. And again, with all of these guys, what we're saying by saying early first for these guys, if you're getting offered a mid first for Quinshawn or Nico or Tyler Warren, we're not doing it. Like, that's what we're saying. And if this isn't happening in your specific league, we try to give you ideas, based on what we're seeing happen in the majority of leagues based on the trade finder tools that we've been able to use. But realistically, I think that Warren's one you can get done. And again, I would rather have a wide receiver there than Tyler Warren. And so I think if you can get an early first for Warren, I'm fine with that. I love Tyler Warren. He returned on value for you. But I think these wide receivers, again, you buy into these wide receivers right now at this 2-3 turn where these firsts are going to be valued, the Tysons, the Lemons, the Tates, and you realize these guys have a ton of upside. Emeka Egbuka had that upside last year, and we undervalued it. And I think somebody like Carnell Tate easily. Don't overlook. Like, I think Carnell Tate's the worst case scenario for all these guys if you trade him for like a top 4 first. Don't overlook what Carnell Tate is doing at Ohio State, producing alongside Jeremiah Smith, who is the best wide receiver prospect that the Bakery has ever seen, by the way. And Carnell Tate, the fact that he is producing in that offense alongside a generational talent like that tells you everything you need to know. Do not overlook him because he's not the wide receiver on his own offense in college. I think he has a ton of value ceiling in Dynasty, and that's why I'm comfortable trading a Tyler Warren for somebody like that if I end up with like a Carnell Tate in the first. Yeah,
then the last player or bank of players, honestly, is going to be, we're going to talk about quarterbacks here, Jordan Love, Baker Mayfield, Bo Nix. If you can move any one of those guys for, yes, a singular first because it is an early first, then we are okay with you doing that, no problem, because the value upside is greater with that first than it is going to be with these QBs and what is becoming a very saturated market, even in super flex formats. Where you can plug and play some of these way less valuable QBs like Sam Darnold, Daniel Jones, Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, and get just similar amounts of production output from any one of those guys. And yeah, the insulation is going to look different for those lower guys compared to your Loves, your Bakers, and your Bo Nixes. But what I care about, again, are these rookie picks that you're getting that are going to offer higher value upside at skill positions like running back and wide receiver specifically, because that's what we're looking at, like these players that we've mentioned, these rookie prospects that we've mentioned. I think one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of people are making at the moment, and I've seen it in a lot of trade offers that I have gotten in a lot of my dynasty leagues, are equating players in down tiers to like, okay, this lower ranked player, insert Zay Flowers, is worth a first. Therefore, 2 firsts, whether they're mid, they're late, or whatever, on top of Zay Flowers should equate to CeeDee Lamb, who is worth 3 firsts, right? We need to like not think in that way. We need to think more, okay, what is the value upside of the assets that you're acquiring versus the ones that you're giving up? And I think that applies to these quarterbacks in this range specifically, is you're just never going to see them ranked higher than where they're currently being priced. And again, you're just going to want to look at every single situation here. Jordan Love, maybe you can't get an early first for him right now because he hasn't been producing the last couple of weeks. Baker or Bo Nix, probably Bo Nix would be the one where that's probably the most possible at the moment. Baker Mayfield, again, going to depend on like any 4-week stretch given for him, right? So keep that in mind and make sure you're shopping those QBs to see what return you can
kind
get.
Of the same thing. I think that the only one there that if you have a rebuilder that has their own first,
Probably Bo.
So I'll put Bo as the cover child, and those other guys are afterthoughts. Maybe you have a contending team with an early first that wants a QB. But I also think that Love and Mayfield are probably more mid-first realistically based on what I've seen in the Dynasty market. But there hasn't been a better time to come join the community and come join the Discord. You can get a team blueprint from Nathan and I. We can tell you exactly which players to send off for picks and which picks you should send off for players depending on what your situation is. Give you your plan for the rest of the season and going into the offseason. It's an important time to make sure we're getting our Dynasty teams right. And so you can get a team blueprint for free with the annual Mother Flocker tier with code DOMAIN. So if you join the site, you get all the tools that we have. You're going to get our rookie draft guide. You get the bakery, which is now on the site and being updated every week. And you're seeing all of these guys in the 26 class. And again, you're going to get a team review from Nate and I. We do all these personally. You'll get the team blueprint. You'll get infinite blueprint, an updated blueprint. So you end up getting like 20 reviews. It's the best deal that we can offer you. And so flockfantasy.com/domain is where you can get it. You just have to use our code DOMAIN to unlock all of our exclusives and get the team review from Nathan and I. If you want to take a look at your Dynasty team, we'd love to do that. Let's pivot now to mid-first. The guys I expect to be in the mid-first this year, as of right now, according to the Bakery Z scores that Ryan releases every week, which you can find on the site as well. I expect this to be guys like Denzel Boston. I expect this to be guys like Jonah Coleman, like maybe Kenyon Sadiq. Maybe you get a QB up here. Maybe you get like a Chris Bell up here. I have Chris Bell listed as a late first, but he could end up being a mid first. And that's a wide receiver that I think has first round upside. If he goes in the first round, you're going to see a big value jump for him. And so who are the guys we're trading for mid first? First of all, Xavier Worthy. Look, I just think from a production standpoint, you're seeing what Xavier Worthy is with Rashee Rice in that offense. And it's less of like, oh, Xavier Worthy's not any good, and more of it's like Rashee Rice is the man. And I don't think Worthy's bad. And I'm not necessarily labeling him as a general sell in Dynasty, but I have seen him moved a lot for mid-first recently, and I would take the mid-first just because I think that the wide receiver that you're going to be getting there, whether it's Boston or whether it's Chris Bell potentially, or even maybe a running back, like a day 2 running back, I think those guys have higher upside from a production standpoint in Dynasty than Xavier Worthy does. I mean, if you get a Boston or a Bell that goes and is actually on a team where they can actually get legitimate volume right away, I think they're going to be valued well ahead of Xavier Worthy coming into this year. I also think you're seeing Xavier Worthy's value kind of trickle down, but I think he's going to lose more value by the end of the season. Whereas for every single one of these trades, you're buying into an asset in a 26 first that is going to go up in value. And so it's kind of just getting off of the Worthy train and then, hopping onto a mid-late first and then riding that up. And I think that the mid-late first will be valued either a late first would be a value equivalent to Worthy in the offseason, in my opinion, but I think a mid-first would be valued more than Worthy. So if you can still get this done for Xavier Worthy, there are still a lot of believers. He's obviously still a very highly regarded prospect that has the age tag that's very young, and I think a lot of Dynasty players are attracted to that. I think it's very doable to get a mid-first for Xavier Worthy, and if you can do it, I think the guys in this range are going to have more production and value upside almost right away when you draft them in your Dynasty leagues.
Then we got a couple running backs here. Honestly, the reason behind why we're moving Jacobs and Kyren Williams are very similar. Both of these guys, very productive, right? They're going to be mid-running back ones, barring injury or anything this season. For those teams, for those contending teams that are on the fringe right now, maybe they're anywhere from 5th to like 7th or 8th, and they have a 500 or above 500 record, and they're trying to make a push. Those are the guys that are 100% willing to move their first and try to go for it and make a run and get a Josh Jacobs or Kyren Williams specifically. Those are the only two guys in that range where maybe you could insert Saquon. He might be a little pricier than that just because of name value. But again, like for a contending team, it makes sense for them to do that. And for you guys that want to acquire that first and get the value upside promise of those mid first with the players that we mentioned that we expect prospect wise to like be in that range with Boston, Coleman, and Sadiq, like you got to jump on that opportunity. These guys are going to be valued higher than these veteran running backs. These veteran running backs will be priced in the range of kind of where Derrick Henry and CMC were being priced right there, the premier high upside productive veterans at the running back position. That's going to be Jacobs and Kyren. They're both under contract, which is great. But again, neither of them are getting any younger. And with Jacobs, obviously his career carry is going up quite a bit. He's going to be 28 years old next season. Kyren Williams, you just never know with that offense. The volatility of that situation with Devontae Adams any given week scoring a ton of touchdowns with Puka Nacua, Kyren Williams, sometimes the afterthought. People are going to freak out about a snap share going down. Is Corum long-term going to eat into his workload? All of those questions that are very reasonable that we're going to be discussing in the offseason. You're not going to have to worry about having that conversation with those players if you just offload them right now for a mid-first and you get that value upside because again, you can get Kyren plus or Jacobs plus in the offseason for that pick if you get it right now before it reaches peak value. And then we got the last player here.
Yeah. CJ Stroud will be the last guy here. And again, like, you hit on some, you miss some in terms of takes. Like, you're never going to bat 1,000 in terms of take. But this is one where, his value has plummeted since the beginning of the season. And I think it was always a good idea to sell CJ Stroud. But I think like what you're essentially getting by trading him for a mid first is, at the worst case, you are re-rolling with a Mendoza or maybe a Dante Moore. I think Dante Moore actually is going to go back to school. Don't quote me on that, but that's my gut feeling at this point. Ty Simpson at the worst. But again, you could also end up getting one of those receivers that we're talking about. And the receivers, you're easily taking them over CJ Stroud at this point. But I'm also just willing to settle with another like top 5 QB with, like a Mendoza skill set, because I think Mendoza can be what CJ Stroud is in fantasy football pretty easily, in fact. And so, like, that's the worst case. But you're going to have more excitement around Mendoza or Ty Simpson or whoever goes like 101, 102, because they just went, and CJ Stroud is now multiple years removed from that and coming off of a fantasy football season where he's just not been productive, and again, is not a difference maker in your fantasy football leagues. He's on our list for fantasy football. Quarterback 22, not touching him. You cannot have a quarterback that is 24 years old be valued where he's valued in Dynasty and not produce. That literally, you cannot have that on your Dynasty team. And so again, I'm more than willing to trade CJ Stroud for any mid first at this point. I do think that's still doable, because there are still a lot of CJ Stroud truthers out there. Me being a CJ Stroud truther myself, but from a fantasy perspective, I'm not anymore, because, again, he's not fantasy productive at this point, and that's really what's most important to us. Late first, I'll let you go first on this one.
And speaking of those prospects that we were talking about in this class of the quarterback position, Mendoza and Ty Simpson, we expect to probably settle in that late first range. You've got other wide receivers in the late first too, whoever's going to settle there. A lot of buzz with Chris Bell right now out of Louisville. Again, Dante Moore, like Avery mentioned, at the quarterback position, if he declares he might be a late first option here. But generally, we're trying to give you guys like relevant players that are generally being moved for these late firsts. When you think about those late firsts, who usually owns those late firsts? Top contenders. What are top contenders generally doing? Offloading their late draft capital for productive veterans at their respective positions at running back and wide receiver. So let's talk about some of those. Chase Brown is one of them right now. Chase Brown is on the up right now. He has been a lot more productive. Production-wise, he's been doing what you wanted him to do to start the season. 12, 25, and 19 points before the bye week. And now with Joe Burrow coming back, probably by week 13 at the earliest, week 14 against Buffalo, that's kind of the range that we're looking at Burrow coming back. It's going to open up this offense even more. And I think that's going to be really good for Chase Brown, and he's going to be kind of rest of the season what he was last season. Maybe not as consistent, but you're going to have that dump down option and an offense that's going to have to pass the ball constantly because this defense is so historically bad. This bodes well for everybody in that offense with Burrow coming back healthy. But again, long-term in Dynasty Fantasy Football, am I excited or optimistic that Chase Brown is going to be the long-term option for the Cincinnati Bugles? Absolutely not. I mean, I much prefer a late first over Chase Brown because he really is not even a one-year Band-Aid. He's a half-season Band-Aid at this point. Like, I would cash out on Chase Brown while you can. You're getting this, like, last breath of, I think, decent value return for him where you can just capitalize right now. Michael Pittman's another guy. Look, we really like Michael Pittman. He's a Colt. We love him. He's awesome. He's always been underrated as a talent. And now in fantasy this season, it's really shown. I mean, you're seeing the level of production that you saw pre-broken back last year. And now it's an offense where they can pass the ball consistently with Daniel Jones. And look, you're going to have plenty of contending teams that are very interested in that in their flex because he's so reliable. And the reality is the value upside of a guy like Bell, of one of these QBs like Mendoza, who's probably going to be going top 5 in the draft next year, is just going to be so much higher. And then a couple of veteran running backs here like Derrick Henry and Rico Dowdle. Derrick Henry is never going to be priced as high as he is now. He's going to drop right down to where kind of Alvin Kamara is priced in the offseason, maybe a little bit higher. But we've officially seen the value peak for Derrick Henry. And we knew that heading into 2025. We knew that heading into this season. It's just kind of been amplified even more because the production hasn't been what we expected it would be because the touchdowns aren't there for him. Look, he looks just as good, but you're going to have plenty of people who for name value alone are going to say, oh, Derrick Henry is going to be on the up rest of the season. He's going to be on the up. The touchdowns are going to finally come. They're going to finally be there. And if you can capitalize and get a late first for him, I would definitely do that right now. Rico Dowdle has been a big riser, not just in fantasy, but in Dynasty as well. And with Rico, like I think similar to Chuba last year and what he showcased for that offense, like I don't think it's going to be anything super long-term reliable for him. I do think he has the build and the skill set to potentially be their option semi-long-term, because, you know, he is that between the tackles back that can run clearly for over 150 yards any given week. But do I trust the value upside of Rico Dowdle long-term over that late first? No, I just don't. And that's something where if you owned Rico Dowdle and you held on to him and you're looking to fold potentially, like this is where you capitalize. This is the value ceiling that you're looking for Rico, where you can cash out now and we're totally okay with it.
Yeah, the ones I Chase Brown, Derrick Henry, and Rico Dowdle, I literally put them on there because when I was looking at trades with 2026 first that have been completed in Dynasty leagues, those are the 3 most common running backs that have been moved for late first. And I really would be comfortable taking a late first for those guys. And then contenders are going to pay a late first for those guys at this point. Early seconds here. Guys like Casey Concepcion I've got here, Jacoby Lane, maybe Jeremy Bernard. I do think you're going to have your kind of pick of wide receivers / maybe day 3 running backs here in this early second round this year. It's not as deep as last year. The early second is going to be weaker, whereas last year we were getting Luther Burden, Cam Scadaboo type guys, Jackson Dart in the early second. These guys aren't that, and so, you know, our standards are lower this year for who we're trading away for an early second. But Kyle Monangai is a guy where I'm fine either way here with Monangai. If you want to hold Monangai because you think he's going to be really going to be something, that's totally fine. I think an early second, though, like you could get one of these wide receivers that has just as much upside. I'm not betting on Kyle Monangai becoming like the workhorse back there in Chicago. I think it's possible, and I wouldn't be surprised if I were wrong about it. But I do think that, you know, more likely than not, what you'll see is them probably bring somebody in or maybe even re-sign Swifty. Even after Monangai looked good with Swifty out, they came back and they gave Swifty all the volume there even recently. And so Monangai's a guy I think if you are seeing him move for early seconds right now, and people are asking. I've had a lot of people ask about late seconds, and I usually say I'd probably hold. Mid seconds, I'm like, Early seconds, I'm like, yeah, I would trade Monangai for that. And so if that's one where a lot of dynasty pilled people are very, very high on Monangai because of what they've seen without Swift. And I think that you can kind of take advantage of that. Woody Marks. This is one where I've actually seen Woody Marks traded for late firsts a lot. Same with Ja'Cory Cross-Chimera. Both of these guys, you can lump them together. And the fact of the matter is, I just think when you're talking about like the Band-Aid solutions at running back, very rarely do you actually see those guys go into next year. Like Chase Brown is not the rule, he's the exception. You very rarely see those guys that are good enough to where they actually like keep their job next year.
It took Chase Brown 2 years too. He was nothing after his first year.
And with Marks like and Ja'Cory Cross-Chimera, first of all, Ja'Cory Cross-Chimera has been in the single digits the last 5 weeks. It's just not a great situation for him in terms of they like to utilize a lot of different running backs, and it leads to just like a super low floor and a very cap ceiling for Ja'Cory Cross-Chimera, 2 things you don't want out of a running back. Woody Marks, on the other hand, has been better. We did the same thing with the Texans with Dameon Pierce a couple years ago. I just don't think that they're going to roll with him as their long-term back. I think what they'll probably end up doing is finding a better Nick Chubb, whether that's in free agency or whether that's through the draft, and splitting Woody Marks and that guy, and I think it's just going to cap his upside. But the second, I think, again, getting those wide receivers in that range, potentially a quarterback in that range, I feel more comfortable with taking a shot on one of those guys. And so, again, these running backs are the ones I see the most commonly moved for like seconds, early seconds in particular. Sometimes mid-seconds, which, again, like a mid-second for Woody, I think it's fair. Monangai, I think it's fair. JCM, I probably would still take a mid-second for Ja'Cory Cross-Chimera, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But those are guys that just, there's a lot of uncertainty around them. You're basically just guessing what their role is going to be next year. I'm willing to just take the second that's going to go up in value. And then DJ Moore, this one's going to be probably a controversial one that Nathan put on here. Nathan, you talk about this one. I mean, you put it on here. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, here's the reality. Players that generally go in the early second range that are drafted, see Cam Scadaboo, see RJ Harvey, see insert some of the better wide receivers in better wide receiver classes that end up falling there. All of them end up being ranked at around the top 100 in terms of market value, generally right by those productive wide receivers that right now are Michael Pittman, Devontae Adams types, Cortland Sutton before he started falling, Rico Dowdle, Travis Etienne, right? Those types of guys. And the reality is I don't really see an avenue for DJ Moore next year to be priced in that range. I don't think that he has enough value upside at this point in his career to ever be ranked much higher than that if he were to be priced in that range, if he goes into like a better situation and they trade him. At this point, we're just crossing our fingers and hoping that DJ Moore is going to be traded. And the reality is, guys, they don't profit off of moving off of DJ Moore unless the team that they trade him to like takes on the dead cap or whatever that they would owe him if they were to move off of him. I just don't see that happening. I mean, that 4-year extension that he signed a couple years back, the dead money, if they cut him heading into 2026, is $35 million. The cap hit only $28 million. Like that's a $7 million difference if they were to move off of him. Here's the realistic and unfortunate reality with DJ Moore. He's probably a Bear next year. And with what Rome Odunze has been showing, with Burden on the rise and Loveland on the rise, he's just going to be buried. He's going to be buried by all of these early second prospects. He's going to be buried by plenty of veterans that are aged at the same range that he is, that have better situations and outlooks than he does, because it's just so crowded there. He has been waiver level in fantasy football this season. He has hardly been startable in any of your leagues this year. So then we got mid to late seconds. Basically just a bunch of guys that you see this every year, guys that fluctuate. They move up because they're somewhat relevant in production in terms of like being a flex option that you didn't expect. Some good guys that we like Wendell Robinson, right, who has been that. But I mean, the guys that we want to highlight here, a good number of wide receivers: Kayshon Boutte, Alec Iomanner, and Jacoby Myers. In a hard rebuild team where I took a shot on Alec in like the 4th round, I cashed out on Alec for a 2nd round pick. It was definitely worth it for me, and I think it's worth it for you if you just get a mid to late second. You're going to get a better level prospect in that range that's in a better situation, or has a better situational outlook and an avenue to be ultra productive than Alec does, I think, long term. They're going to probably invest in a wide receiver if it's not in the draft, maybe in free agency next offseason to kind of build around Cam Ward. Alec just has a very capped ceiling. And Kayshon Boutte, again, has been very boom bust this season. I think this is another situation where they're going to want to build on that offense and probably get a true alpha wide receiver long term for Drake May to consistently rely on, because right now Drake May has been elevating everybody around him, but none of them have been consistent options. I don't expect Boutte to be a long-term consistent option there. Jacoby Myers kind of has a last gasp of like really solid relevance from a fantasy perspective this season, to a point where a contending team who needs some depth would pay a mid to late second for Jacoby to plug into their flex if they're struggling with injuries right now. He went from a really bad situation in Vegas where he was productive previously to not this season. Now has been moved with no Travis Hunter to Jacksonville, and he got some more work than some other wide receivers who are already pre-established in that offense did in his first week in Jacksonville, so you can cash out now. And then Kamani Vidal, who is just a short-term rental. This is basically Jordan Mason to a lesser degree. Jordan Mason was so overpriced, it's not even funny. We talked about him being a sell in Dynasty about a month ago, but with Kamani Vidal, everybody knows that Hampton's coming back, but you do have contenders that are so desperate for running back production right now, they will pay a mid to late second to get the short-term production from him right now, and this is probably the last week that you can get it done.
So again, we used, just to be clear, I literally used 3 trade finders to try to find what the most common guys being moved for all of these different picks were. And so, these trades are happening in Dynasty leagues. We've gotten questions about a lot of these guys. If you can't get them done in your leagues, we try to aim high always. When we're trading away players for first, we always try to aim high. So like, we are trying to trade away the lowest possible player for an early first, the lowest possible player for a mid first. And their idea is a lot of times you're not going to be able to get these done, but we wanted to give you, for especially the more casual players, and we try to fit like that 75% of leagues type deal, where you can get a lot of these done. And again, these are deals that are happening in a lot of Dynasty leagues right now. And so, again, hopefully you can use some of these for ideas. Again, if you prefer the player over the pick, it's literally just an either or decision. Like we don't blame you at all, but we're talking through like trading for these rookie picks. We wanted to give you some names behind that, and also some names behind who is going to be going in this 2026 class. So drop a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed as well if you play Dynasty Fantasy Football. We appreciate you guys so much. See you with another video on Thursday.